What a wonderful Sunday celebrating play when we have two baptisms. And I said this at the first service too, but all we really need to do is bring the children up here. Let's look at them and watch them play for 15 minutes. It'd be a much better sermon than what I'm about to deliver. The kids know better, of course. They've gone off to kids play, right? They don't need the practice. They do. But for us, we have a harder time with play. Hard for us to engage, to connect to the playful parts of ourselves. As much as we know it's probably good for us, like eating vegetables, there's something about us as adults. We lose our way. We forget who we are in the spirit of play. And I think we have to acknowledge that religion has a great deal to do with this, actually. In many ways, religion gets in the way of a lot of good things in life. Like I said last week, if you were here, I quoted... I forgot who it was, but it's actually H.L. Mencken, who was a columnist, newspaper columnist in the turn of the 20th century and a social critic. And he talked about Puritan Christians. He talked about those serious Christians that just didn't get play. And he described them this way: Puritan Christians, people of faith, are people who have a deep foreboding fear that somebody somewhere might be having a good time. And that's kind of our inheritance in our religious traditions. He was inspired by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said on many occasions that Christians, in his experience, have no joy. Pretty remarkable. It's pretty cutting. But to think that the people of God, the people who are inspired by the good news of love, could have no joy. He was to say near the end of his life that he would only believe in a God who danced. He never did meet the God who danced, but we have. We gather here Sunday after Sunday celebrating the God who dances. But I don't think that's easy for us as adults. I don't think it's easy for us to incorporate this idea of play. I think we're really smitten and immersed in a culture that's all about production. It's all about what we accomplish, all about results. And play often doesn't accomplish much, or at least it doesn't appear to accomplish much. There's a story about Oliver, who is a 10-year-old. And Oliver has his mother at wit's end, which, 10-year-olds often have their mothers at wit's end, so that's not that surprising. But Oliver, he was labeled by his school and by the neighborhood as a problem child. Really, he wasn't a problem child at all. Oliver just liked to play. The problem is sometimes his play had consequences. So his mother grew more and more exasperated with him until finally she laid down the ultimate threat. Oliver, today, I've had it. You're going across the street to talk with the minister at the church. The ultimate threat. So Oliver went across the street, and this wasn't, going to meet John Pentland. You have to picture this, right? If John was meeting with Oliver, he'd be conspiring about his next activity, right? This was not Hillhurst United Church. This was a serious church that took religion church. They not only took religion seriously, they took almost everything seriously. So Oliver walked into the church. He walked in the door and he walked down the long, dark hallway, got to this big old oak door, knocked quietly on the door, waited in silence. Finally, he hears this deep voice from within, "Come in." So he opens the door, steps into this office, all lined in books, every wall, except a small window on the one side. Looks across to see this huge desk, and behind that, an even larger man, all dressed in black, except for one white dot on his throat. He says, "Sit down." Oliver sits and looks at his shoes. Finally, after a moment of silence, the minister says, "Oliver, where is God?" Oliver just looks down at his shoes. After another minute, the minister says again, "Oliver, where is God?" Oliver lifts up his head, looks across the long shelf of books, looks out the window, doesn't say a thing. "Son, I'm going to ask you one more time," because he was a Trinitarian. Where is God? Oliver shakes his head and looks down at his feet. The minister says, forget it. I have nothing to do with you. I can't do anything more with you. Go on home, now. Oliver gets up in a shot, out the door, down the long dark hallway, out the front door, across the road, into the house, up the stairs, into his bedroom, shuts the bedroom door, leans against the bedroom door, huffing and puffing. His little brother Bobby's playing on the floor. He says, Bobby, I'm in big trouble. They can't find God and they think I had something to do with it. It's true. It's a true story. It's true because when we don't play, when we lose our connection to play, we lose God. We disconnect with the divine in everyday life. The loss of the sense of play for us seems to directly coincide with a loss of a sense of mystery, of joy, of the enchantment of everyday life. The church has not always been good at honoring our inherent human need to play, and our culture hasn't been much better. Obsessed with the idea of production and accomplishment. In the process, we have reduced faith to a kind of moralism and life as a set of rules. And in the process, we suffocate soul and we lose connection to the divine in our everyday living. I think in our society, it feels like, to me at least, playing is usually seen as something kids or dogs do, but not adults. You know how many videos go viral about animals playing with each other? Like you see those constantly. It's bears or cats or dogs, whatever it is. I think it's because secretly we want to be like them. We want permission to play. We want permission to do more than just our to-do lists, to be more than just our job titles. And it's not just about work versus play. There's as much time to play at work as there is in the rest of our lives. It's about bringing who we are fully to life, to engage the world with who we know we are. I'm driving my partner Catherine to work every day because she's been injured in her shoulder, and she's at the university, and so I'm driving through this long detour through this parking lot. It's very complicated. You can get lost for days, I think, in this detour, right, to come out to the other side. And I'm getting the hang of it now, and there's a construction worker on either end before you go in and after, you know. It's kind of like this spiritual journey you take into Dante's world. Anyway, I'm going through this parking lot and weaving through, and everybody's kind of grumpy, right? Because this isn't the way we're supposed to go to wherever we're going, right? We have to take this long detour, and then there's cars backing out, and it backs up. It takes forever to get through this Dante's tunnel that we have to go through, right? So finally, you get out to the other side. But on the other side, if you're paying attention, there's another construction worker. He gets it. He's got the most mundane job in the world. It's freezing outside. He's wearing all these clothes, right? And all he's doing is waving cars through this little spot, right? But he gets it. He's not only waving cars through, he's cheering them on. He's encouraging them. In the slow pokes, he's yelling at them and banging on their cars to say, get moving this way. And then when you get nearer, he starts to wave you through, and he just gives you an honor, and he bows before you. He loves the work. He brings play to his life. And you know what happens? I'm no longer grouchy about going through Dante's tunnel in the middle of my day. I have a smile on my face as I come through the tour. It's a remarkable gift that we can bring. Spirituality is clear, and it clearly emerges in our wisdom texts. Today we read from the writings of Ecclesiastes, who reinforces the point and demonstrates that we are invited to be a people and a community who embrace all the rhythms of life. There is a time to plant, and there is a time to uproot, a time to hurt and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, What was the line I didn't read? A time to keep and a time to give away. Although in today's language, I think it would be a time to keep and a time to recycle, right? So don't forget your $5 and $10 if you leave the church. Right? A time to weep and a time to laugh. I love listening to you laugh. This is a laughing community. It's so good to be here because when you laugh, we bring the fullness of our humanity out. And it allows and creates space for us to mourn, to bring our sorrows. One of the most remarkable things I've experienced in the very short time I've been hanging out with the ministry team here is when we have our weekly worship gatherings, worship planning gatherings on Tuesdays, we always start with some question or some activity. It could be silly, it could be serious, but mostly it's silly. And a couple of weeks ago, we asked the question, okay, today, in this moment, if you were a vegetable or a fruit, what would you be, right? Silly question. Like, who invents these things, right? Isn't it remarkable, though, when we start to talk about why we're a rutabaga, right? Or at least why we feel like one, something else opens up. Suddenly there's this space that's there for me to share something way more vulnerable than I was planning to, way more about who I am than I wanted to. Why is that? Because play is an opening, a door. It creates a space for us to be more than who we've been. It creates a space for us to be who we fully are. It opens us up to what the Celtics love to call the thin moments. The thin moments when our two worlds, the world of the visible and invisible, the world of the known and the unknown, open up together. The veil lifts. And in that moment, remarkably, we see and feel and hear new things. In those moments, those grace moments, just for a second, we glimpse something that's greater than this present moment, and yet fully present. Something that connects you to everyone else and everything else. The thin moments. They recenter us, and they reorientate us to each other. Playing is also a resistance. We are reading this book by Courtney Gatto. Some of us are passing it around, called The Grace of Playing. And she describes the reality that play creates this space, but it also helps us as a kind of a resistance against the world of injustice and pain, allowing us to come to know an alternative future in the process, giving us hope for the reign of God's new creation. Play brings what is most life-giving even to the places of death and pain and isolation. So we open up this space in our play. We are invited this week to recognize all the ways we play and what that brings to our living and why we should do that more. But we struggle because our culture doesn't encourage us very much. There was a rabbi in New York, Ed Cohn, who I read years ago, got so frustrated because it seemed to take us forever to get this point that we knew inherently as children. And at the end of life, he would bury the wise ones that finally got it, that returned to play in the last years of their life. And he kept saying, why does it take us so long? Maybe we've got the life cycle all backwards, he thought. So he wrote this down after one difficult funeral. This is what he wrote. Life is tough. It takes up a lot of your time, all of your weekends. And what do you get in the end of it? I think the life cycle is backward. You should die first and get it out of the way. Then you live in a nursing home for 10 years or so, until you get kicked out because you're too young. Then you get a gold watch and you go to work. And you work for 40 years or so until you're young enough to enjoy your retirement. Then you go to college and you party until you're ready for high school and then grade school. And then you become a little kid and you play. And you have no responsibilities. And that is until you become a little baby and you go back to the womb, and finally you spend the last months floating until you finish up as a gleam in somebody's eye. That, my friends, is the best description of the reign of God I have ever heard. We